We're back again, Jared on an island. We're back sharing our thoughts, our schizo notes. Hopefully the wind isn't too bad for the audio. I'm gonna test this real quick. Okay, the wind's pretty bad. It's affecting the audio. I can still listen to my music while I talk, so that's great though. Hopefully CapCut can edit this. But Jared on an Island, Suburban Homestead, the official Crash Out, episode 1. I think that's what I'm gonna call this series, the official Crash Out. Just because, you know what? I think it's time we go all or nothing in terms of what we truly believe. I think that certain figures in our culture have officially, blew the whistle, shot the starting gun of the race towards complete freedom or complete submission to society. And I think that time's now. And by certain figures, I mean Ye specifically. I think that we've crossed the line where it's either all or nothing in terms of life. I think everyone has a point where that happens, where you have to decide, you know what? Are you going to crash and burn and chase your dreams? Or are you going to be okay with what you already have? The sense of honor in society has been completely lost. You don't see anything nowadays that tells you to recognize the same sort of thing that the samurais talked about all the time, which is being able to die knowing you did your best. Being able to die knowing that you tried as much as you could in order to achieve your one goal in life. The real line isn't that you did it or not, it's that you tried. It's not about if you actually accomplish it. Evolution has this thing where 99.9% of species fail. Now, you can say, oh, but that 0.01% is rewarded with life. Not technically. That DNA is passed on, but that species, that individual that had that DNA does not get to experience its earnings. It's only the offspring that gets to experience it. But for some reason, that species decides to prevail against all and still accomplish that goal. So I think that's what we need to keep in mind here, and I think that's what we need to strive to do. It's not about you. It's about 1,000 years from now. It's about what it could be for your DNA in the future. This changes the perspective of almost every moral questioning in your life today when it comes to what you should recognize as something worth your time. When you see influencers in pop culture today getting canceled over serious things that are not okay, but at the same time, things that are completely arbitrary to the grand picture, to 1,000 years from now. Something that is completely irrelevant to the grand scheme of things when you realize the amount of trauma that's already built around the fact that you act out because of that trauma. I love in emo songs when they use quotes from movies, and I think I'm gonna do this here. It's not your fault, Stewie. It's not your fault. The accident wasn't your fault. If you know that Family Guy reference, that's deep, man. That's a deep Family Guy reference. And it's actually very applicable to a lot of our lives, because most of those negative things that you blame yourself for are completely not your fault. You enacted these things out of the trauma that society gave you. You shouldn't blame yourself. I'm not saying it's 100%. Yes, you do have some responsibility in the fact that this occurred. You could always do better in your own control, but you have to remember that your control in everything is very finite. It's very little. Most of the time when you have an action that you believe you had control over, it's a lot littler than you think. It's a lot more minuscule than you think. And I don't think you should completely blame yourself for that. I think that's something you have to actually recognize in the fact of moving forward to that next decision that you do have control over, or at least some control over. So when we see celebrities that get canceled over these obvious bad choices that they made, you have to keep that in mind. And you have to remember, is it worth your time to traumatize yourself over this? Or is it worth your time to take whatever art they created and put it into your own life and implement it in a positive manner? Most of the time, people will spend more time making sure that everyone understands why this person is canceled, rather than take what that person got famous for and having it positively affect their life. Everyone can think of their favorite YouTuber and a reason why they got canceled. There's no one that it hasn't happened to. So I think it's time for us as a society to move forward from this. I think we gotta just let bygones be bygones after a certain time, and recognize people for their work, not for their past faults. If they do it again though, after the fact, listen, that's the whole point of justice, so that there's a permanent change, right? It's not so that you can make the same mistake over and over and over again after the fact that you've learned it, but once you know, okay? This is why samurai had the idea of seppuku. In a certain way, it was the form of ultimate justice. If you weren't able to accomplish something that needed to be accomplished, you'd seppuku right there and it would be over. There's no more change after the fact. It's the ultimate punishment for yourself, because you no longer have that control that God gave you in terms of life. And also it lets everyone who was affected by you move forward. Nowadays, we have all this tossing around of justice, where we have the person and they either need to be rehabilitated or serve time. People think that it's a punishment to take time out of your life, but in reality, it's more of, oh, well, you caused me trauma, I'm gonna cause you more trauma back. It doesn't really help in terms of overall life. If our whole goal in life is to worship life itself, since that's what God gave us, then why would we deteriorate someone else's because they did it to us? It doesn't make any sense. If anything, you take that from them because they gave that up by taking it from you. Now, something I want to get clear here is that nothing I say here is going to be 100% fact. Again, I know I've said this in episode 1, but generalizations is something that is a part of the IQ. And if you don't have a high enough IQ to understand that when I say like, oh, all of this is bad, and it doesn't actually mean all of it is bad, then I think you need to go reevaluate your position in life and consider what is actually true to you, first off. But back to what I was saying about dreams and your goal, your ultimate goal in life. The longer that you live and the longer that the society exists, the matrix, some people call, the more bars are added to your cage. Most people don't really compromise on their dreams. They just cope after the fact that they failed on them in order to be okay with the fact that they failed. If you don't believe me, I encourage you to write down 3 things that you'd rather die than not accomplish in life, okay? And put a timeline of when you have it occur. Everyone can think of a time when they were 16 or 18 or even 12 and be like, oh, when I turn 16, 18, 24, 30, whatever, when I turn that age, if I don't have this, my life's gonna suck. I'd rather die than live that life. So many people, everyone knows someone on Twitter or something like that, they'll say, I'm just gonna end it by 30. I'm just gonna end it by 30 because I'm obviously not gonna enjoy life. You don't think everyone else in a previous generation has said the same thing? They all say that, and once they hit 30, they go, wait, never mind, I'm kind of okay because I've been living the same life since I made that decision. They were okay then, and they're gonna be okay now. It's just complete cope, and it's not natural. You were trained from a child to be okay if it doesn't work out, because you were never in a natural position to feel that it was gonna work out in the first place. You're constantly told, subconsciously, that it was never meant to be the way that you feel it's supposed to be. Your inner genetics are telling you to live a completely different life than you are now, and you're wondering why you feel distraught but at the same time, comfortable. Because in reality, you'd rather live as a slave than die free. Think about that. Why isn't it important to you? Now, many people would say, well, slavery's been around for all of human history. It was a requirement. It's supposed to be there. It's been there the whole time we've existed. And this may be surprising, but that's somewhat true. But that's not how it should be for the future. Humans have been constantly living in the second and third dimension simply because of restraints that we put ourselves in the natural world by not exerting ourselves to the fullest. In terms of societies where we've seen the most progress, they've needed to establish themselves into a basic principle of getting all of their needs set before they can do something like intellectualism, right? And even in those societies, they had slavery. But the thing is that they got to progress the rest of us by so much that it was necessary for that time from their foundation. But because we are where we are today, we can move past that and not require that anymore in terms of the next advancement. The thing that is required of us, though, is for us to put in that 110% into not only maintaining what allowed us to get to that intellectual state where we can push progress forward, but also have it so that the next generation isn't starting on the same level we are. Obviously, around us, in terms of government, in terms of culture, there's so many things where people let the cultural foundation deteriorate to make it harder for the next generation. An example of this is the housing crisis that we see today. It's going to be harder for my generation, which is Gen Z, to establish a foundation of ownership when it comes to housing, when it comes to really anything, because there is a generation that's prioritizing lack of ownership in order for their own comfortability. And comfortability is going to be the enemy of progress in this case, because we're not at a level where we can be comfortable. That's why it's more important in our time now than ever to have this sense of what is referred to in the Hokage as honor, and the idea of, sort of like a samurai, in that we have to sacrifice ourselves from the get-go in order to carry on, let's say, 1,000-year plan, right? And this can easily be done without putting others down, because we have the tools to have technology do the things that we need to for us. And a reason why this didn't happen faster is because previous generations did not conserve knowledge the way they should have. When you go to bed at night and you have these ideas that are obviously going to be beneficial for you the next day, and you forget them, why do you forget them? Because when you had the idea, you knew you should have wrote it down, but you didn't. So that same idea is what other people had to begin with. They wanted to share history orally instead of through the preservation of textbooks. Now we want to share the knowledge online, but then we don't want to take the time to establish archives of technological knowledge, So if we don't have these foundations and we don't use these foundations to educate the future generations, they're going to go through the same trials and tribulations that we did to get to where we are now. When you think of the Dark Ages, people weren't able to move forward from them because, one, they weren't doing as much as they should have in order to accelerate the knowledge that they had, but also because there were outside forces trying to destroy that knowledge at the same time. So you may say, why does it feel almost good to, not write down that idea when you have it? Why does it feel good to not do the right thing? Well, there's a lot of outside reasons why, of course, but another one is because it's a lack of understanding, and it's a lack of that foundation that you should have been taught. But also it's because we're not where we should be in terms of genetics. And this isn't a bad thing on our end, because it's not our fault. It's literally no one's individual fault. It's a fault of an overall idea. I guess it is kind of our fault. It's everyone's fault a little bit, but it's no one's individual fault, so nobody should be to blame for it, is what I mean. It's just a societal fault. So the thing is that like when you think of doing something bad, it's a sign for you that you're not in correct living from the get-go. A soul sees no benefit in it. The problem, for example, is learning something before true understanding, and then completing a mistake which self-induces trauma, even if it was someone else's fault. In a perfect world, understanding of understanding would be taught first, and then mistakes would still happen, but correction would happen with complete forgiveness. So if you're taught how to learn something, right? This is like the most basic example that everyone can recognize. In school, you're kind of taught, okay, here's like for math, for example, here's the process of how to do it. And then it's up to you to understand the process, right? And eventually you get to a point where you're like, okay, let's say for algebra, as an example, it's an understanding of the process of how to understand the process, right? Does that kind of make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but you kind of get a mental picture, a mental shape of how to understand processes, okay? This is huge in computer science. If you were to teach that to someone first, the process would make a lot more sense. But because everyone is able to understand different processes differently, the education system can't go with that step first. They have to rely on you to figure it out. And then that's how you get a distribution in terms of stuff like the SAT score. It kind of lets people fall into their place of where they should be. If you're going to excel and have grasps on processes easier, the school system isn't really meant for you. Obviously, you're going to excel after the fact, and you probably have an extremely high IQ. But for those that have lower IQ, they need the process first, no matter what, because it's not about understanding, or it's harder for them to understand in general. And of course, the understanding and the process of understanding creates aesthetic and creates the world around you. So that's why it needs to be a true understanding of the world in order to push it forward. And that's why I think that what I'm saying is going to prevail in the end, because it's such a long-term form of perspective that it triumphs as long as people push forward for it. And obviously, if we're able to understand it now, that means it's time to push for it. We'll see if that happens though.